One summer morning in 2008, Lorena Garcia, a woman from Spain, woke up like any other day, but within minutes, she noticed something was deeply off. Her bed sheets had an unfamiliar pattern. She was wearing pajamas she didn't remember buying, and she found work emails from a department she had never worked in. Her confusion turned to panic when she realized her current boyfriend had vanished, and in his place was her ex, someone she had broken up with 6 months earlier. Only now, it seemed like the breakup had never happened. Everyone around her insisted nothing had changed. But for Lorena, it felt like she had been shifted into another version of her life. Her story spread across international forums, made headlines in Spanish media, and caught the attention of researchers exploring alternate reality experiences. There was no physical evidence, yet the clarity and consistency in her account forced many to ask hard questions. Could the reality we live in be less fixed than we believe? Could human consciousness actually slip between timelines, where other versions of ourselves are already living? As controversial as her experience may be, it touches the heart of what quantum physics, ancient philosophy, and even spiritual traditions have been hinting at for centuries. Reality is not singular, it's multiple, and consciousness is the key. In today's video, we'll wrap up this exploration, not with a final answer, but with an invitation. Because if this idea of syncing with alternate realities is real, then you, not anyone else, hold the ability to step through that door. At the end of this video, I'll share a few simple yet powerful practices you can use to experience this for yourself, not just hear about it. So stick around for that part. And if something in today's topic sparks something in you, like the video, subscribe if you want to keep going deeper, and drop a comment if you've ever had a similar experience. Because who knows, maybe that strange feeling you had wasn't just your imagination. Maybe it was the moment you stepped into another reality. Schrödinger's cat is a famous paradox in quantum mechanics. Imagine a cat locked in a box, with a random mechanism inside that could either kill it or not. Until you open the box, the cat is considered both alive and dead at the same time. Sounds absurd, but this is how physicists illustrate a strange feature of the microscopic world. A quantum system can exist in multiple states simultaneously, until it is observed. From there, in 1957, physicist Hugh Everett proposed a controversial idea. Instead of the universe choosing just one outcome when observed, it actually splits into multiple branches. Each possibility happens, but in different realities. This is called the many worlds interpretation. According to Everett, every time you make a choice, an alternate version of you makes the opposite choice. In another reality, it might sound like science fiction, but interestingly, this concept isn't unfamiliar to some Eastern spiritual traditions. In Buddhism and Hinduism, there's a perspective known as Van Phap Due Tuk. All phenomena arise from consciousness. Reality isn't something independent out there, but a reflection of the mind. In other words, the world you're living in appears based on how you perceive and experience it. The Sikh tradition adds an even more personal take. Each soul is a ray of light from a greater source, temporarily experiencing its own unique reality, like countless radio waves being broadcast at once. Each soul is tuned in to its own frequency, a version of the universe synchronized with its specific consciousness. But why do we only perceive one reality out of billions of possibilities? The answer may lie in the human brain itself. Think of the brain like a radio. There are countless stations in the air, but you only hear one at a time, depending on which frequency you're tuned to. The brain works similarly. It locks your awareness into one particular stream of reality, while other versions still exist, just beyond your perceptual range. As abstract as this might sound, neuroscience has shown that the brain filters out over 99% of sensory input, just to help you function in daily life. So, is it possible we're also filtering out entire layers of reality? Moments like déjà vu or vivid, inexplicable dreams. Could those be times when we tune into a different reality? Maybe intuition is simply a fleeting signal from those parallel paths, realities our consciousness hasn't fully accessed yet. And if it's true that we're living in one version among countless realities, then the question isn't, do parallel worlds exist? But rather, how do you change the frequency you're tuned into? For centuries, classical physics shaped our understanding of reality. The world is made of solid objects. Everything follows predictable rules, and cause and effect are neatly aligned. In that view, reality exists independently of us, whether we observe it or not. But then came quantum physics, and suddenly everything we thought we knew got flipped on its head. One of the strangest features of quantum mechanics is superposition. Instead of being in one state or another, a particle can exist in multiple states at the same time. It's not just either or, it's both. An electron can be here and there. A photon can spin up and down. It only chooses a state once it's measured. Until then, it's a cloud of probabilities. That alone is enough to challenge our everyday logic. But things get weirder with the famous double-slit experiment. Fire a stream of particles like electrons at a barrier with two slits, and they'll create an interference pattern on the other side, like waves, that suggests each particle is going through both slits at once, interfering with itself. But as soon as you try to observe which slit it goes through, the interference pattern disappears. The particle acts like a solid object again. It's as if the particle knows it's being watched and changes its behavior accordingly. And then there's quantum entanglement, the phenomenon Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance. Two particles can become linked, so that whatever happens to one instantly affects the other, even if they're light years apart. Break the rules of space and time? Apparently, yes. This isn't just theory. It's been proven repeatedly in labs. When you measure one entangled particle, its partner responds immediately, no matter the distance. These quantum effects aren't just theoretical puzzles. They're already shaping the future of technology. Quantum computing, for instance, uses superposition and entanglement to process information in ways classical computers never could. Instead of bits that are either 0 or 1, quantum bits or qubits can be both at once, dramatically increasing processing power. Meanwhile, quantum communication promises ultra-secure data transmission. That's impossible to intercept without detection. But here's the part that truly bends the mind. What if consciousness itself is linked to the quantum field? Some physicists and theorists suggest that awareness might not just observe the quantum world, could be part of it. If consciousness operates like a quantum field, then perhaps it isn't fixed to one version of reality. Perhaps it can shift, jump, or resonate with other possible outcomes, just like particles in superposition. Think about that. If particles can exist in multiple states until observed, and if observation changes their outcome, then the act of consciousness might be fundamental to how reality forms. It's not just that we're watching the world unfold. On some level, we might be helping create it. This isn't about magic or wishful thinking. It's about physics. Serious, peer-reviewed, Nobel Prize-winning physics that's forcing us to rethink the nature of reality itself. Maybe reality isn't a fixed stage we walk onto. Maybe it's more like a sea of possibilities, constantly shifting, and our consciousness is the rudder. If that's true, then the big question isn't just, what is reality, but what role are we playing in shaping it? Most of us grow up believing that consciousness is something our brain produces, like steam from a kettle. But what if that's not the whole story? Philosopher David Chalmers, one of the most respected voices in the study of consciousness, suggests a radically different view. Consciousness isn't just a byproduct of the brain, but a fundamental field of information. something that exists independently, woven into the fabric of the universe itself. This idea challenges materialist thinking, where everything, including the mind, is seen as a product of physical processes. But it resonates strongly with ancient philosophies, especially Advaita Vedanta. According to this school of thought, your individual self, Atman, is not separate from the ultimate reality, Brahman. In simple terms, your consciousness isn't in the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself through a particular lens. This doesn't mean your ego is the center of everything. It means the core of your being is made of the same essence as the cosmos. So how does this relate to parallel realities? If consciousness is more than just neurons firing in a skull, it might not be locked into one single version of reality. In fact, different states of consciousness may offer access to different dimensions of experience. Brainwave research supports this possibility. When your brain is operating in normal waking life, it's mostly in beta frequency, busy, focused, and tied to the physical world. But in deep meditation, lucid dreaming, or out-of-body experiences, brain activity slows into theta and delta waves. These slower rhythms are associated with non-ordinary states, inner stillness, timelessness, and vivid imagery that feels more real than reality itself. Theta and delta states aren't just spiritual fluff. They've been observed in EEG scans of advanced meditators, as well as people undergoing intense dream states or sensory deprivation. Some researchers believe these states allow the brain to tune out the default sensory world and receive information from subtler levels of reality. Think of it like switching from local radio to satellite frequencies. You're accessing a different channel altogether. Institutions like the Monroe Institute have studied this for decades, using sound technology to help people enter deep altered states and report consistent experiences, floating outside the body, encountering alternate versions of reality, even interacting with intelligences they can't fully explain. It might sound wild, but the experiences are remarkably structured, and they repeat across cultures and individuals. Mainstream science is also starting to pay attention. Studies at Harvard and Princeton have explored how human intention or consciousness might subtly influence physical systems. One line of research involved random number generators, machines that produce purely random data, showing statistical deviations. When people focus their attention on them, the effect is small but persistent, suggesting that consciousness may interact with matter in ways we don't yet understand. Put all this together, and a fascinating picture emerges. Consciousness might not just experience reality. It might navigate between different versions of it. If awareness can shift its state, it might also shift its access, jumping tracks, so to speak, between parallel outcomes. It reframes a lot of spiritual practices, from meditation to dream work, not as escape from reality, but as training for tuning into other layers of it. And it raises a provocative idea. Maybe the real frontier isn't out in space, but inside the mind. A woman dreams she's speaking fluent Japanese, flawlessly, with words and grammar she's never studied. A man wakes up with vivid memories of operating a strange type of machine, unlike anything in our world. These aren't just random dreams. They feel structured, purposeful, like glimpses into somewhere else. What do we do with that? Are these just tricks of the mind, or something deeper? Dreams have long been dismissed as noise, fragments of memory and emotion, scrambled by a sleeping brain. But this view is changing. In recent years, more researchers have begun to see dreams, not as meaningless, but as meaningful windows into consciousness itself. And in some cases, maybe even into other realities. Think of dreams like a screensaver that comes on when the mind is idle. But instead of random patterns, it shows scenes, some familiar, some impossibly foreign. Why do some dreams feel more real than waking life? Why do some leave us shaken, with emotions we can't explain? These are the moments that make people wonder, what if that was more than just a dream? Alan Hobson, a neuroscientist and sleep researcher, found that during lucid dreaming, when a person becomes aware they're dreaming, the brain can be just as active as when awake. In other words, your mind isn't off during dreams, it's doing something else entirely. In lucid states, people have reported gaining information, solving problems, and even accessing knowledge they couldn't explain logically. This includes languages, technical skills, or historical memories they never learned consciously. Some theorists propose that dreams could be access points to parallel realities, a kind of soft crossover where your consciousness dips into another version of you, living a slightly or vastly different life. If you've ever had a dream that felt like a memory from another timeline, you're not alone. Many people report recurring dreams of unfamiliar cities they instinctively know, or relationships with people they've never met in waking life, but feel deeply connected to. Déjà vu plays into this too. That eerie moment where you know you've been here before, said these words, lived this moment. Mainstream explanations tie it to glitches in memory processing. But there's a more curious possibility. You have experienced this before, but not in this timeline. Maybe in a dream, maybe in another strand of your consciousness. If that's true, then dreams are more than rest. They're exploration. They might be showing us fragments of other lives, other paths we could have taken, or might still be taking, in a parallel version of ourselves. So how do you work with that? Start by keeping a dream journal. Write down everything you remember, even if it's fragmented. Over time, you'll start seeing patterns, people, places, symbols that repeat. Before sleep, set an intention. Show me what I need to see. It sounds simple, but intention matters. You're not just asking for a dream, you're asking for access. And that small shift, treating dreams as messages instead of noise, might just open a door, not just to your inner self, but to other versions of you, flickering just beyond the veil. Nelson Mandela died in prison. At least, that's what millions of people vividly remember. They recall news reports, public mourning, even televised tributes. The only problem? That never happened. Mandela was released in 1990 and later became president of South Africa. This bizarre mismatch between memory and recorded history gave rise to what we now call the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect refers to the strange phenomenon where large groups of people remember something one way, but historical records say otherwise. It's not just one or two folks misremembering, it's entire communities convinced that something they experienced is real, even when all evidence suggests the opposite. And it's not just about Mandela. Maybe you remember the Berenstain Bears as the Berenstain Bears, or think the Monopoly man wears a monocle. He doesn't. Some people swear the location of New Zealand is off, or that the famous line from Star Wars was, "Luke, I am your father." It's actually, "No, I am your father." These might sound like minor quirks, but they stack up, creating a bigger question. Why do so many people remember the wrong version? The conventional explanation points to how human memory works. Memory isn't a perfect recording, it's reconstructive. Every time we remember something, we're not pulling up a file, we're rebuilding it. That leaves plenty of room for distortion. Psychologists call this false memory, and it's been demonstrated in lab settings. People can be convinced they remember events that never occurred, especially when exposed to subtle misinformation. Add in the influence of media, conversations, and cultural cues, and it's easy to see how a wrong memory could spread and stick. That's the scientific view, clean, logical, and somehow unsatisfying, because it doesn't explain the feeling. If you've ever experienced the Mandela effect yourself, you know it's not just confusion. It's eerie. It's unsettling. It feels like you know something happened differently, even when the facts say otherwise. This is where quantum theory and metaphysics come into the conversation. Some thinkers propose that the Mandela effect isn't a glitch in memory, it's a glitch in reality, in a universe where multiple realities exist side by side. As suggested by the many worlds interpretation, it's possible that we occasionally jump tracks, shifting from one version of reality to another, without even realizing it. In this view, the old memory isn't wrong, it's a remnant from the reality you were in before, and if collective consciousness plays a role in shaping or navigating reality, then mass shifts could happen, leaving behind subtle clues, brand logos changing, lines from movies being slightly off, or maps looking different. Some even believe these shifts could be triggered by global emotional events, shifts in consciousness, or anomalies in time-space perception. It's speculative, yes, but it opens the door to asking deeper questions about how reality forms and how fixed it really is. So the next time you're convinced something used to be different, maybe it was, whether it's a memory error or a slip between timelines, the Mandela effect reminds us of one thing: reality may not be as stable or as singular as we've been led to believe. A woman undergoing surgery flatlines for several minutes. When she wakes, she describes in detail the room next door, down to the color of the equipment, the people inside, and what they were saying. The twist? She's never been in that room, and there was no way to see it from where she lay unconscious. Her case, like many others, falls under what's known as an out-of-body experience, OBE, where consciousness seems to separate from the physical body and perceive the world from another vantage point. These aren't just strange anecdotes. The Monroe Institute, founded by Robert Monroe, has spent decades studying and teaching how to deliberately enter altered states of consciousness, including OBEs, through their hemisync technology, specially designed audio frequencies that synchronize the brain's hemispheres. They help individuals reach states of deep relaxation and focused awareness. Many who've gone through the program report sensations of floating outside their body, traveling to unfamiliar places, and even communicating with non-physical entities. Then there are near-death experiences, NDEs, which take this to another level. People who have technically died, heart stopped, no brain activity, often report vivid journeys to otherworldly realms. Common themes include moving through a tunnel toward a bright light, encountering deceased loved ones or spiritual beings, experiencing a profound sense of peace and unity. Time becomes irrelevant. Space doesn't follow the usual rules. For many, the experience feels more real than waking life. These reports are strikingly consistent across cultures, ages, and belief systems. And while skeptics point to brain chemistry and hallucinations, there's still no full explanation for how some people gain accurate information they had no way of accessing while dead. It suggests that consciousness under extreme conditions may not be bound to the brain at all. Interestingly, Tibetan Buddhism offers a conceptual map for these experiences in the form of the bardo, a transitional state between death and rebirth. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, after the body dies, consciousness enters the bardo, a realm filled with visions, karmic reflections, and spiritual challenges. It's a place where the soul must navigate its way forward, potentially toward liberation or another life. The descriptions often mirror what NDE experiencers describe: floating above the body, encountering beings of light, moving through surreal landscapes that respond to thought and intention. So what does this mean? Whether through meditation, OBEs, or near-death states, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that consciousness can function independently of the physical body, and that what we consider reality may be just one layer of a much larger field. These aren't just mystical ideas or personal beliefs. They're increasingly being explored by researchers, psychologists, and even physicists interested in the boundaries of perception and the nature of mind, and they open up a deeper question. If our consciousness can travel, remember, observe, and return with new insight, what exactly is it connecting to? Maybe we're not just minds trapped in bodies, but explorers, with access to a much vaster map, one that occasionally opens when the body sleeps, falters, or learns how to listen beyond the noise. Scattered across the globe are places that have captured human imagination for centuries, not just for their beauty or mystery, but for something harder to define. The Bermuda Triangle, Mount Shasta in California, Sedona's red rock formations, the Giza pyramids in Egypt, and Machu Picchu high in the Andes. These aren't just travel destinations. Many believe they're energetic hotspots, where the veil between realities thins, and extraordinary experiences become possible. These sites are often associated with what some call energy vortexes, points where the Earth's magnetic field is said to swirl or intersect in unusual ways. According to this theory, these areas create natural gateways for expanded consciousness, while mainstream science hasn't confirmed vortexes as measurable phenomena. Countless visitors report altered states when they spend time at these places, heightened intuition, shifts in perception, and an overwhelming sense of connection to something beyond the physical. Sedona, for example, is famous for its vortex energy. Travelers speak of feeling vibrational pulsing through the body while hiking, seeing colors more vividly, or entering meditative states with unusual ease. Some even describe time distortion, where hours feel like minutes, or vice versa. At Mount Shasta, legends of hidden beings and ancient civilizations like Lemuria still circulate. Locals and spiritual seekers alike report dreams becoming lucid, synchronicities intensifying, and visions appearing during quiet reflection. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid has long been thought to sit on a powerful energetic grid point. Ancient architecture, precise alignments with stars, and the strange acoustic properties inside the chambers add to the mystery. Some people who meditate within the pyramid report out-of-body sensations or profound emotional releases, even without any belief in the supernatural. And then there's the Bermuda Triangle, perhaps the most famous example of something's off here. While skeptics blame weather patterns or navigational errors, the sheer volume of reports, missing ships, malfunctioning instruments, and people feeling like they've slipped into a time warp keep the mystery alive. From a metaphysical perspective, what's happening in these places might not be magic, but resonance. If the human body and brain operate on subtle electrical and magnetic frequencies, and the Earth has its own energetic patterns, then certain locations could act like amplifiers or tuning forks, shifting our internal frequency and allowing access to deeper layers of consciousness. Some researchers suggest these sites function like portals, not in the sci-fi sense of teleportation, but as energetic thresholds. When the body and mind are in a receptive state, calm, open, unguarded, they may tap into other timelines, other realities, or even other versions of the self. It's not about escaping this world, but expanding our perception of what's possible within it. Want to explore this for yourself? You don't have to travel halfway around the world. Start with nature. Go somewhere quiet, near water, in the forest, on a hilltop at sunrise, and simply sit. Breathe. Notice what you feel, not just physically, but vibrationally. Set an intention, clarity, insight, connection. These small practices can help tune your awareness, like adjusting a radio to catch a clearer signal. And who knows, you might just start picking up whispers from a reality just beyond the one you've always known. Not everyone is convinced by ideas of parallel realities or non-physical consciousness, and for good reason. In fact, many respected scientists openly reject these notions. Take Sean Carroll, a theoretical physicist at Caltech. While he supports the many worlds interpretation in physics, he firmly denies that it implies we can somehow jump between realities, or that consciousness plays a role in shaping which reality we land in. To him, consciousness is an emergent property of brain activity. Nothing more, nothing mystical. This reflects the broader consensus in traditional neuroscience. Consciousness arises from complex interactions within the brain. Neurons fire, synapses connect, and somehow awareness emerges. Under this view, once the brain shuts down, so does consciousness. There's no separate field or energy behind it, just biology doing its job. From this perspective, ideas about souls, reincarnation, or realities beyond the material world are comforting stories but ultimately unfounded. Skeptics often argue that many of the claims around out-of-body experiences, near-death visions, or accessing other dimensions rely heavily on subjective reports. They point to the brain's known ability to hallucinate under stress, trauma, or lack of oxygen. What looks like a mystical experience could just be neural static, a misfiring brain trying to make sense of extreme conditions. And then there's the accusation of pseudoscience. Critics argue that many of the concepts tied to parallel realities, energy vortexes, or quantum consciousness lack rigorous evidence. They say it's easy to wrap speculative ideas in scientific language without actually doing the science. Without controlled, repeatable experiments, they argue these theories can't be taken seriously. But here's where things get more complicated. In recent years, some researchers have started to challenge the materialist view. Studies on brainwaves during deep meditation or lucid dreaming show unusual activity that doesn't always align with standard brain behavior. Out-of-body experiences have been documented in controlled lab conditions, where participants accurately describe environments they couldn't physically access. And then there's Princeton's PEAR lab, which studied the effects of human intention on physical systems. The statistical deviations they found, while small, persisted across thousands of trials. These findings don't prove the existence of parallel realities or consciousness as a non-local field, but they do suggest that the materialist model might not be the full picture. It's also worth noting that while skeptics demand solid proof, they often can't fully disprove these phenomena either. If consciousness is indeed limited by our current tools of measurement, then dismissing what we can't yet detect might be just as unscientific as blind belief. A more balanced view is to treat these ideas not as facts, but as working hypotheses. They may not be confirmed by peer-reviewed studies yet, but they offer a framework for exploration. They encourage new experiments, new perspectives, and new questions. And sometimes that's how progress happens, not through certainty, but through curiosity. So while the jury is still out, the conversation is far from over. And maybe, just maybe, what seems like fringe today is just science that hasn't matured yet. Why bother thinking about parallel realities or alternate versions of ourselves? Isn't that just science fiction, or at best spiritual daydreaming? Maybe not. Tuning into the idea of multiple layers of reality isn't just an abstract thought experiment. It has real, grounded value in how we understand ourselves, make decisions, and live more consciously. First, there's self-awareness. If parallel realities exist, then you are more than just the version of yourself sitting here reading this. You are a multidimensional being, someone who has taken different paths, made different choices, and lived different lives across countless versions of reality. Connecting with that concept helps loosen the grip of identity that's tied only to past experiences. Suddenly, you're not just the person who failed at that job, or someone who always struggles with relationships. Somewhere, a version of you succeeded wildly, and that version can become your guide. This perspective adds depth to introspection. When you face a big decision, you can ask, which version of me has already figured this out? What does that feel like? You're not imagining things. You're activating a part of your consciousness that holds more data than just your memories in this timeline. Whether you call it intuition, higher self, or cross-dimensional insight, the effect is practical. Better decisions, less fear, more alignment. Then comes spiritual growth. Realizing you are one thread in a vast interconnected web softens the ego. It makes space for empathy, for compassion, for understanding that others are also navigating their own versions of reality. The more you expand your awareness, the more you sense that you're not just here for you. You're part of something bigger, what some traditions call the collective field or the one mind. That shift in awareness naturally leads to more mindful action, more kindness, and a clearer sense of purpose. This framework also empowers manifestation. If infinite versions of reality are playing out, then there's already a version of you who has what you're striving for. Connecting with that version through visualization, meditation, or journaling turns goals into roadmaps. You stop thinking in terms of maybe and start aligning with already. That changes how you show up every day. You don't hustle to get there. You begin to embody it. And perhaps most importantly, the idea of parallel realities invites us to live more freely. If multiple outcomes are always possible, you're never truly stuck. No decision is final. No failure is absolute. You can pivot, shift, and grow in any direction, because reality isn't a single track. It's a web of options, constantly reshaping itself in response to your awareness and intent. This doesn't mean we escape responsibility or float through life untethered. On the contrary, it's a call to live more intentionally. Knowing there are many possible versions of your life puts the power back in your hands. It reminds you that choice is real, and your inner world plays a role in shaping the outer one. So no, connecting with alternate realities isn't about escaping this one. It's about understanding that this one is far more dynamic, flexible, and alive than we've been taught. And that's not just inspiring, it's a game changer. Connecting with a version of yourself from a parallel reality might sound like science fiction, but with the right mindset, it becomes a surprisingly practical and insightful experience. Think of it less as chasing something mystical and more like tuning a radio. You're adjusting your inner frequency to sync with a version of you who already exists, just on a slightly different wavelength. Here's a simple and effective method you can try. It's best done when you're relaxed, unhurried, and open-minded. Set aside about 20 to 30 minutes in a quiet space. 1. The hallway meditation, choosing a door. Close your eyes and slow your breath. Imagine you're standing in a long hallway. Along the walls are many doors. Each one leads to a different version of you, living a different timeline. Some doors may look plain, others vibrant. Let your intuition guide you. Pick one that feels right. Maybe it has a symbol on it. Maybe it glows. Don't overthink, just trust. When you walk through the door, imagine stepping into a moment in that version's life, where they've already achieved something you deeply want. Confidence, clarity, success, love. Observe the space. What do they wear? How do they move? What energy do they give off? Just being in their presence shifts something in you. You're not imagining a stranger. You're meeting a version of yourself with valuable data. 2. Automatic writing. Let the message flow. After the meditation, grab a notebook or open a blank document. Without filtering or editing, ask this version of yourself a question like, what do I need to know right now? What helped you become who you are? What's my next best step? Then start writing. Don't analyze. Just let the words flow, even if they seem random or unexpected. You might be surprised what comes through when you stop trying to think the answer. 3. Embodying the feeling. One of the fastest ways to connect with a version of you from a more aligned reality, is to feel like them. You don't have to wait until the job, the relationship, or the breakthrough comes. Ask yourself, how would they walk? What music would they play? How would they start their day? Even doing something simple, standing with posture, speaking with more calm, or choosing an outfit they might wear, sends a powerful message to your subconscious. This is who I'm syncing with now. For ask and listen. Throughout your day, or before you sleep, drop in an open-ended question like, what would my parallel self do here? What have I been avoiding that they've already faced? What belief do they hold that I can start practicing now? Then pause. Be curious. The answer might arrive in a thought, a song lyric, a dream, or a moment of sudden clarity. The point is to stay open, without forcing it. Important reminder, don't force it. This isn't about control. It's about alignment. If you find yourself trying too hard, let go. You're not summoning something, you're tuning in. Emotion is the dial. Calm, curiosity, trust. These are the states that open the channel. Even just imagining a better version of you strengthens the neural pathways that help you become them. And over time, you might realize that version of you isn't far away at all. They've been waiting for you to knock on the door. So here's the bottom line. Reality isn't fixed. It's flexible, responsive, and far more layered than we've been taught. And if that's true, then the idea that we can sync with other timelines, other versions of ourselves, isn't just a fantasy. It's a possibility worth exploring. You don't need to believe blindly. This isn't about adopting a new dogma. It's about curiosity and direct experience. Try it for yourself. Keep a journal. Practice stillness. Pay attention to your dreams, your intuition, those subtle nudges that seem to come from just beyond the edge of logic. You'll start to notice things shift, not overnight, but steadily, meaningfully, whether you call it spiritual insight, quantum physics, or simply tapping into the subconscious. This journey of communicating with yourself across realities is deeply human. It's personal, empowering, and honestly, kind of beautiful. It reminds us we're not stuck. We're not limited. We're not alone in our own skin. And hey, if this resonated with you, take a second to like the video. Subscribe if you want more content that actually makes you think, not just scroll. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever felt like you met another version of yourself? In a dream, in a decision, in a déjà vu moment? Share it below. I read everything. Let's keep exploring together.